This presentation, titled Risk Avoidance, a Breakthrough Approach to Risk Management and Risk-Based Thinking, comes to us from Tom Taormina. Tom is a subject matter expert on the ISO 9000 series of standards, who has written 10 books on the beneficial use of the standards. He has worked with more than 700 companies and was one of the first quality control engineers at NASA's Mission Control Center during projects Gemini and Apollo. As a business consultant, Tom conducts strategic business assessments, root cause analyses, process planning, quality management, and risk assessment for companies from startups to global brand leaders. As a consulting and testifying expert in products liability and organizational negligence, he conducts formal assessments of the defendant companies to determine if they exhibited an appropriate or negligent standard of care in introducing their products or services to the stream of commerce. His proprietary methodology has been trademarked forensic business pathology and has been an accepted credential by trial attorneys and judges. And with that, take it away, Tom.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank Exemplar Global for inviting me to be a presenter for the Online Auditor Expo. My hope is that your takeaway from all of these sessions is that standards auditing should be a proactive value add for any organization, not just a compliance tool. As a trainer and mentor, I found it helpful to compare companies to living organisms. We can all relate to that metaphor. Each is unique, each is complex, and they're continually in motion. The interaction of people with processes causes the health of an organization to be in continual flux. Every organization has a unique DNA that evolves over the life cycle of the business. Quality professionals typically concentrate on process effectiveness and defect avoidance, but seldom map the genome of the entire company. This presentation focuses on risk avoidance at an organizational level. That requires us to become more aware of the systems within our organizations and how they interact. There's been much written lately about companies letting their certifications lapse because the principals do not see a return on investment in their management system. The same is true of the cost of Six Sigma programs and their measurable benefit to the bottom line. If we are to be of sustained value to our organizations, we must focus on the business objectives and how we contribute to them. Also, we can become the front line of risk avoidance and shield our companies from foreseeable liability. To continue with the metaphor, all organizations have an innate pathology. Startup companies almost always have genetic defects that are born with the company and are propagated as they evolve. In my experience, startup companies seldom are built on a process-based infrastructure with an established vision, mission, and values that are communicated to all from the embryonic foundation. The absence of formal business management systems, the lack of meaningful metrics, the lack of awareness of risk potential are all genetic effects that will eventually cause stunted growth or evolve into a catastrophic incident. Dormant issues can come to life by external influences like the economy, market pressures, evolving technology. They can also become manifest as new people join the organization, bringing external viruses to the company. Without ongoing diagnostics and treatment, organizations can suffer chronic illnesses or die prematurely. For perspective, I've identified several common diseases I've encountered with my work with more than 700 companies. The first is enterprise entropy. Without continual maintenance and improvement, organizations deteriorate over time. All organisms weaken without proper nourishment and health maintenance. The second I learned from futurist Joel Barker. He teaches the effect of our paradigms and how they influence our actions. Paradigms are closely held beliefs that either innate to our being or learn from experience. They blind us to new and innovative ideas. His most compelling example is that the Swiss watchmakers believed so strongly that their mechanical watches would always be the dominant timepiece they lost nearly all of their market when Asia began making digital watches. The last is myopic vision. It's the most prevalent within the quality community. We're so invested in our tools and methods, we do not see the big picture of organizational health. The first step in becoming more effective champion of business success, we need to study the pathology of an organization from startup to sunset. At startup, businesses have the lowest success potential and the highest risk potential. Among the many entrepreneurs I've worked with, getting product to market and creating cash flow is almost all the time they spend and energy on. As they grow, they create sustainable cash flow. Their focus is still on market share, and they're unaware of any potential latent defects they may have delivered. As they gain market share and show a profit, their success potential peaks and a known risk is at its lowest. At this point, enterprise entropy takes its toll. It is typically some major event or product recall, market collapse, or changing technology that begins the downward spiral. This is also where business leaders finally assess their symptoms and turn to process, quality, and system management for fixes to their problems. In my experience, at this point, organizations often reach some degree of homeostasis, where they continue to operate but never reach their true potential. Over the last decade, many of my consulting assignments have been at terminally ill companies. Hopefully, this Auditor Expo will help you become more effective agents of robust organizational health. When I started doing expert witness work in products liability and organizational negligence, I was shocked by the number of defective products that cause property damage, injuries, and death. As I investigated defendant companies, I found that unforeseen liability issues had been overlooked sometime for years. When we build the same products or provide the same services day in and day out, we become oblivious to innate design or manufacturing flaws that may escape our quality management programs. We also operate under the false assumption that components and products we buy from the same supplier may change over time without notice. Traditional process controls and quality management tools measure process variability, but seldom look for foreseeable risk. Process metrics look at variability within control limits, but do not measure risk trends. Every organization has risks that are awaiting the exact combination of random events to converge and create unforeseen crises. Almost every expert report I write contains a root cause that the incident was a result of a perfect storm that no one saw coming. Foreseeable risk is a legal term that means danger which a reasonable person should anticipate as a result of his or her actions. The term is not typically part of our lexicon as standard professionals and auditors, nor do we want to learn of it as an allegation in a lawsuit. The first step in creating risk avoidance culture in your organization is awareness of how to identify foreseeable risk and eliminate its potential occurrence. Awareness starts with defining what risk means to your organization. Take a moment to internalize these three definitions. If those definitions left you confused, let's further obfuscate the definition by adding the ISO 31000-2020 guidance. So, what's the definition of risk for your organization? Let's go through the list and see what might resonate with you. A situation involving exposure to danger. Make sure organizations achieve their objectives. A systematic approach to considering risk. Something we avoid automatically, which is an oxymoron. Avoiding danger in business. Creation and protection of value. Avoiding lawsuits, or compliance with regulations. Now we'll attempt to bring some clarity to the definitions of risk. From my experience as a quality control engineer at Mission Control in Houston, I've chosen Project Apollo as the benchmark to compare the timeline we discussed earlier. I lived every minute of Apollo, and this model has been my reality check ever since. The first type of risk is assumed risk. A valid example would be a test pilot flying a new plane for the first time. In the case of Project Apollo, virtually all the technology was new and untested. Until subsystems and systems were integrated, outcome was unpredictable. Unfortunately, the assumed risk manifested itself in the Apollo 1 launch pad fire that killed 3 astronauts. A spark ignited pure oxygen environment and a hatch that could only be opened from the outside. It was a perfect storm that was unforeseeable. For organizations, they seldom understand that their growth period is the breeding ground for assumed risk. Entrepreneurs develop their products with the best intention, but are oblivious to potential risk and unforeseen problems as they arise. Now we've defined assumed risk. Let's deal with what most of us confront daily, foreseeable risk. The Apollo 12 mission made we learned many lessons from Apollo 1. They paid off with nearly flawless moon landing of Apollo 11 and the safe return of the astronauts to Earth. The Apollo 12 mission made another successful landing on the moon. By the time Apollo 13 flew, the press assumed it would be another routine lunar landing and did not cover much of the TV broadcast until an oxygen tank exploded and created a seemingly impossible rescue mission. Most of us have seen the movie several times, but may have not heard the rest of the story. What caused the explosion was a known defective oxygen tank that was mislabeled, and a technician installed the defective tank in the service module. After 2 successful lunar landings, we became complacent and allowed human error and process failure to infect the project. I left Mission Control before the shuttle first flew because I saw the decay and complacency within the original rocket scientists in administration. They were being replaced with business people. The explosion of the shuttle Challenger was a direct result of his decision to launch in temperatures that were below mission parameters, so they did not have to pay the expense to defuel the rocket and scrub the launch. That is a catastrophic example of ignoring foreseeable risk. In business, when organizations have achieved their primary success goals, they too become complacent and lose focus and start cutting costs without regard to risk and liability consequences. This phase of the business life is a great opportunity to ignore foreseeable risk. As we learned in Six Sigma 101, each process has a predictable number of potential variables. We have tools to predict the outcome of process training and avoid mistakes. What we do not have is the ability to predict human variability. Depending on the culture of your organization, people can create, hide, and allow defects to move to the next workstation and inevitably to the customer. I can teach manufacturing and quality skills, but I can't teach individuals to care. I just finished working a case where a high-pressure hose carrying liquid propane burst, causing extensive fire damage and multiple injuries. The person who assembled the hose was the lead internal auditor, the most senior assembler, and had helped write the work instructions for the assembly process. After much research and deposition transcripts, it became obvious that some defects were inevitable in their manufacturing processes. In that kind of culture, they had all the trappings of a viable quality management system, but if it's acceptable to have occasional defects, they always will. That's why I use the term pathological to describe foreseeable risk. Risk is a disease that must be studied and eliminated. Human variability and familiarity can be overcome in a culture of risk avoidance and personal accountability. After several years of performing expert witness investigations, I had an epiphany that the foundational tenets of quality management were fundamentally flawed. Our process management and defect avoidance programs are not about acceptable quality level. They're about hurting people or causing catastrophic damage. In this case, a defective switch in a space heater caused resistive heating to the point of reaching the ignition temperature of the plastic case. The molten plastic ignited nearby clothing. 2 children sleeping in the bed perished. In deposition, their quality manager stated that their goal was no more than 1% defect rate. Unfortunately, 1% of 50,000 heaters they made that year is 500 units. The 1% may look good on a control chart, but it doesn't pass the test of common sense. ISO 9001:2015 and other harmonized standards provide our infrastructure to inculcate foreseeable risk into the culture of your organization. This chart provides a map to begin the process. The first step is to define foreseeable risk within your organization. In the case of the space heater company, they sell large quantities of electrical consumer products that are built to intentionally get hot. Their duty of care was to ensure that every electrical component was safe for continuous use, and the case was flame retardant. Unfortunately, to remain competitive, their cost cutting included replacing ceramic wafer switches that engaged the rotary contact in 2 places with plastic switches with beryllium copper wipers making spring contact with each other. The switch met the minimum standards of UL safety testing, but the eventual resistive heating was foreseeable. Clause 4 of the standard defined the context of the organization. I recommend you rewrite your definition to adopt a maxim from the medical industry. Above all else, do no harm. Clause 5 is about leadership, commitment, and policy. In a risk avoidance culture, the policy for quality can be no more complicated than no defect ever reaches a customer. When we get into the paradigm shift for risk avoidance in the coming slides, the rest of this chart will start to become a roadmap for identifying foreseeable risk. There's a major paradigm shift needed to move beyond risk-based thinking to risk avoidance. The transition must start at the top and would be most successful by creating a standing committee implementing the new culture of continually increasing efficacy of risk avoidance. First, we need to examine our tools for built-in risk opportunities. For instance, FEMAs are often problem-solving tools that are conducted by the same group that is responsible for the part, product, or service being evaluated. Familiarity breeds overlooking unforeseen pathogens. Risk is seldom a key in the FEMA process. Management systems are also focused on problem solving and continual improvement, but not looking for foreseeable risk. Organizations that have formal risk management programs are often in place because of regulatory requirements or insurance directives. Managing risk is often a costly overhead process, not a proactive initiative to eliminate risk. The other key to transitioning to risk avoidance is to conduct brainstorming sessions to look through customer complaints and product defects to simulate how customers can use your products badly or for the wrong purpose. There are currently dozens of lawsuits against the company that makes the NutriBullet personal blender. They did not fully anticipate how customers could misuse the product, including putting very hot liquid into the blender and having the agitation cause the plastic bowl to shatter, scalding the user. The new paradigm must go beyond thinking outside the box to what I call thinking outside the globe. Objective introspection is the key to avoiding risk. The organization must make it their goal that a defective product never reaches a customer. Yes, it is possible. I worked with a pharmaceutical warehouse that never shipped an incorrect order in 12 years. Once your organization has defined what risk means, remap all the process procedures and standards to focus on risk avoidance. Finally, redefine and create metrics for the effectiveness of risk avoidance. These are the fundamental tenets of a foreseeable risk. Effective vision, mission, and values that comes from the top. True leadership, not management. Documented process management. Meaningful metrics. Personal and group accountability. Personal and group risks and rewards. Integrated voice of the customer and supplier partnerships. These are the imperatives for identifying foreseeable risk and implementing risk avoidance. We as quality professionals need to expand our skills to also be business professionals. The single greatest contribution to organizational success we can make is to eliminate risk and potential liability. We must become the champions of creating a culture of risk avoidance with the goal of zero defectives ever reaching a customer. I urge you to study and internalize these three challenges. It is possible to avoid risk rather than mitigating it. Traditional quality management tools are designed to minimize nonconformities, not to eliminate them. Of the 40+ cases where I have testified as an expert in products liability, every single catastrophic failure was avoidable. Most alarming to me was that 100% of the ISO 9001 certified defendants were not following their own procedures. In my experience as a consultant and an expert witness, the most compelling case for implementing risk avoidance is avoiding a lawsuit. In every case I have worked, the defendant company was blindsided when they were served with a lawsuit. The allegations first stunned the principals and then drove them into damage control. Is this true? How could it have happened? Have we overlooked this issue for years? Who can we blame? A lawsuit will traumatize a company and its principals, and they will never fully recover financially or emotionally. Here's another dramatic example of foreseeable risk ignored. Two avid female golfers were playing a very hilly golf course. They'd rented a golf cart from the clubhouse and were enjoying their play. Traversing a very hilly path, the passenger was thrown from the cart and sustained major damage to her spine and hips. Detailed investigation of golf carts revealed some disturbing facts. The side handles are very small and recessed so that golfers can slide in and out of the seat. There are no safety belts. There are no handles on the dash or the canopy structure. While they have a controlled maximum speed, it does not take into account steep terrain. What limited safety warnings were provided were underneath the place where the scorecards were retained. In deposition, the manufacturer represented that they had to design golf carts for large and tall people to easily slide in and out. They claimed that golfers would not wear seat belts, and they saw no need for any handles or grips. The most shocking testimony was that the company had a long history of defending lawsuits from individuals who were injured using their product. In fact, they had a line item in their budget to cover lawsuits. I call my methodology for researching and creating expert reports forensic business pathology. It involves using quality management tools to prove that a defendant did or did not exhibit an appropriate standard of care in delivering their products or service into the stream of commerce. The use of this fishbone diagram can visually impact a jury and leave little doubt the defendant was responsible for the disaster. My final case study exemplifies the folly of offshore manufacturing. Investigators found that the electrical receptacle for a window air conditioner was the origin of a fire that led to the demise of a family as they slept. Forensic science concluded that the outlet was defective and unsafe for its intended use. Investigation of the manufacturer discovered that the outlet was assembled offshore in a facility controlled by a United States holding company. The compelling evidence of negligence from discovery led to the judge allowing the plaintiff's representatives to conduct an inspection at the offshore factory. There, we discovered fabrication, assembly, and inspection processes were grossly substandard. The production equipment had been transported from the manufacturing facility of the previous owner in the U.S. and was being operated by workers who had no training and no idea of what they were building. While the product was UL listed for safety, it was under ongoing prescribed surveillance in the U.S. The requirements of the UL listing had been grossly ignored and never adequate inspection of the offshore facility. Changes had been made to the product that were not discoverable without forensic testing, and there was no testing done of the product after assembly. The picture is a reconstruction of the failure by an electrical forensic expert. The same outlet was purchased at a local hardware store, and an identical air conditioner was used for the test. Smoke and arcing occurred within a few hours of operation. This is my recommended call to action. There are formal tools to measure organizational risk. If you're interested in them, please contact me. The call to action is to replace risk management with risk avoidance. Look for foreseeable risk in every process. Break out of our QMS paradigms. How can this product be done badly? How can this process be done badly? How can a customer use this product stupidly or for unintended purposes? Again, formal risk assessment is available. Please contact me if you're interested. Becoming an expert on forensic business pathology will also make you more valuable to your organization as you shield them for liability and become a profit center by rooting out foreseeable risk. Back to you.
Well, thank you, Tom Taormina, for that very excellent look at risk avoidance, risk management, and risk-based thinking. And that concludes this presentation.